The affirmative is trying to make a distinction between may carry states and shall carry states. In California, you are not guaranteed the right to carry a concealed weapon. You only may carry it if the police approve it. Their argument is that that's a bad policy because everybody who wants to meet the criteria shall be able to carry a gun. Our argument is that that might be a great idea, but their evidence doesn't even come close to proving that distinction. Please come to contention number 1. In subpoint A, they argue that the police do not have a legal obligation to help people. My first argument is that this argument is irrelevant. It does not prove a significant problem in any way, shape, or form. My second argument is the legal obligation is irrelevant. The police respond to protect people. I don't care whether we can sue them in court because they don't come fast enough, or whether we can sue them under some legal obligation. The reality is that's what the police do. They respond to crime when you call 911, whether it's their legal obligation, their moral obligation, their social obligation. I don't care what you call it. They respond when you call. Subpoint B. They say the police can never protect all of us all the time. My first argument is that is an irrelevant standard. Utopia will not exist on earth. Neither will heaven. Our argument is that that is not a significant problem. My second argument is that there is no proof, we will argue, that guns are going to do anything better with a may carry state or shall carry state in this regard. Subpoint C. They argue that the police will not stop crime in the 9/11 system. My first argument is that preventing the crime is not the point. People are still going to commit crime. That is what their evidence even indicates. Criminals are not going to stop being criminals. They are going to still do what they do. Our second argument is that, and our DA will prove, that arming individuals is not the solution to deterring that crime along the way. Our third argument is that deterrence assumes that you don't know who has the gun. That's the argument my partner is making in cross-examination. That people fear the risk of a gun. They fear the risk of someone shooting them, and that's why they don't do what they do. And that exists in the status quo right now because California already allows concealed weapons. You never know. There might be somebody in this classroom that has the right to carry a concealed weapon. And that is what goes on the mind of criminals at all times. In subpoint D, they say that California has a high number of homes with guns. My first argument is this proves our point. The status quo does not need to be changed. There are already tens of millions of guns in the status quo. Second argument, those guns aren't deterring crime. Look at their last piece of evidence. People are still getting raped in their homes. People are still getting murdered in their homes, even though those guns are there. They're not solving the crime problem. Our third argument is that if deterrence is going to work, it would work already. There are tens of millions of guns in the status quo. That's what their evidence says. And if criminals were afraid to commit crime because of it, which is also their solvency evidence, then the status quo has already solved this problem. You do not need to increase the number of concealed weapons to get deterrence to work. There only has to be a fear that someone in the room has a gun. In E, they say 163,000 violent crimes occur. My first argument is this evidence does not distinguish in-home versus out-of-home experiences. The only crime this affirmative case deals with are those crimes that don't occur at home. Because at home you have a gun. You get to have your gun wherever you want it. They're only talking about crimes that happen outside the home. My second argument is I will argue that most of those crimes happen in the home. Listen to the category of crimes that she listed: murders, rapes, and robberies. These happen in people's homes. And our argument is that if guns were going to work, they would have already worked in this situation. More importantly, they can't claim this as significance because this evidence is not specific to outside the home. Look, does crime exist in the status quo? Of course it does. Does saying crime exists make it a significant problem? No, because we live in an imperfect world. There is not a reason to change the status quo at this point. Contention 2 says if we change it, they'll solve it. So point A, they say that there are no costs if law-abiding citizens own guns. My first argument is the evidence concedes that there will be an increase in accidents. It doesn't matter if you're well-intentioned or not. That's the definition of an accident, is you don't intend it to happen. Our second argument would be that the accidents and the impact of accidents far outweigh any deterrence effect that they're going to get from crime. Because our argument number 3 will be they're not going to increase deterrence. The level of deterrence that they're going to get already exists in the status quo. Tens of millions of guns exist. Concealed weapon permits exist. Deterrence already exists. Adding more guns will not increase deterrence. In subpoint B, they say handgun permits decrease crime. Extend it. We already do this in California. They already have permits. It's just not everybody who wants one gets one. My second argument is that their evidence doesn't distinguish between shall and may carry. Their evidence only indicates that if we have permits, that this decreases crime, and California already has it. In subpoint C, they say that criminals will move to other crimes. My first argument is that this still proves that crime will exist. My second argument will be that we will argue that when they move to these other crimes, there are still guns involved, and our disadvantage will prove that even in those non-violent crimes will suddenly become violent because now there are more guns. In subpoint D, they say civilians will have their deaths averted. My first argument is, once again, this evidence does not distinguish between shall and may carry permits. It only indicates that concealed weapons permits help. My second argument is California already has concealed weapons. So any benefit that you would get in California from deterrence has already existed. Look, the affirmative is making a small, minute change in our law. People already have the right to carry concealed weapons, but the police have to approve it. They want to take that away and let you get a gun if you meet the criteria. Our argument is that small change will not have a significant solvency benefit, especially in light of the disadvantage that my partner will read. Questions?
Okay. So you mentioned that the police not responding to protect any individual citizen is not a significant problem?
Yeah, my argument is that the idea that you say that they're not legally obligated, where that quote comes from is the notion that we can sue the police for getting to a 9/11 call too late, or sue the police for not doing their job well enough. And my argument is that's not the point on this issue. The point is when someone's coming into my house, a criminal's coming into my house, and I call the police, they come. They don't say, hey, we're under no legal obligation to come. Will you pay us? They come. It doesn't matter about this legal obligation. It's irrelevant, I think was my argument.
Okay.
Because they come out of some obligation, moral, economic, something.
I mean, will they come out of the obligation to restore social order? I mean,
great, they still come.
But if the police, I mean, if there was a riot downtown and then someone's house and then someone was being robbed, like they'd have to respond to that instead of going to somebody's house. Like they're not.
That's right. They have to prioritize because they can't be at all places at all times, and we don't want a member of the police in everyone's home. And I would argue, and we don't want everyone with a gun fighting off the criminals either.
Okay, and then California does allow concealed carry permits, but the sheriff has to decide who is allowed to get one.
Yeah, argument that's a good thing.
Well, why is that a good thing? I mean, people should be allowed to be able to protect themselves.
Now, our argument is the sheriff knows better, and the sheriff knows who needs guns and who doesn't.
Even though there were 163,957 violent crimes committed?
Even though, because I don't believe the trade-off of guns. I already said that if that was true, the 10 million guns in the homes would have stopped all that to begin with. Crime happens even though there's guns.
Crime does happen even though there are guns, but...
And guns aren't going to stop that crime.
Crime would be lessened if people were armed, though. If people were able to defend themselves,
I guess
and
we're going to have to disagree about that.
I guess so. All right. And then
Tom.